Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The Spa in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is Freedom Fighter. Amazing people like you share ways to ensure your freedom physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-given knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and giving a voice of freedom to those who are also looking to have their best life. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Evan Money. He is a happily married man and a two-time #1 best-selling author and global entrepreneur. Evan, welcome to the show.
Oh, Diane, so excited to be here with you. I still remember our delicious conversation at Nicole's wedding, and I was like, wow, that was so amazing. My bride's like, who is that? I'm like, I know, she's so wonderful. So to get the...
Well, I was reflecting on our chat recently as well, because I think how amazing and apropos that I met you at a wedding with Nicole and her Calvin, and got to sit at the table with Susan and your beautiful daughter. And, you know, for you being the co-leader of the Marriage of Greatness Revolution, and we meet at a wedding, I mean, God is amazing, right?
Yes, indeed.
So good. I love it. Well, while we were talking about this, you have this wonderful adventure. And one of those books here is the Ever After Happily. And what I love about that title is I've actually had friends of mine talk about the whole, happily ever after. And I'd have friends go, after what? So I love how that gets turned around, is that, ever after happily, right? And that you are actually talking about, the freedom that could come within marriage. And you have gotten married more than anybody I know to the same person. And I'd love you to share a little bit what was behind that story. But, wedding number one, July 5th, 1997. So this year, in just a few weeks, comes up on number 25. So I have to ask, where is that wedding going to be?
Actually, I apologize. The PR team did not give you an accurate count. We're coming up on wedding 29.
What?
Yes, because I understand the value of long-term goals. And my buddy Bob Proctor taught me this. I got some chances to really get to know him and hang out with him a little bit. And he really encouraged me one time where he kept talking about, this was when he was still in his 70s. He was talking about, on my 100th birthday, he had this 100th birthday extravaganza all planned out at the Bellagio Hotel. Everything's booked, ready to go. And I'm like, dude, that's like 25 years away. And then I start realizing, man, if you're putting that much energy and effort in planning something, you're probably going to show up for it. So I said, he expanded my mindset, helped me break a paradigm. And I said, you know what? What if my bride and I got remarried in a different state or country every year, but our goal now is 100 weddings by my 100th birthday. And I would like to say that that's really far away, but it's really not. So for the math, people that are challenged with the math like me, it will require my bride and I, we are already doubling and tripling up in certain years. And so, as you know, Diane, not you, of course, but some of your listeners may know, you've crossed that threshold of age when you start getting river cruise catalogs in the mail. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not that old. What are you talking about? But I started looking at the map and I'm like, wow, they go to like 9 different countries on that cruise. I'm like, that's 9 right there. And then we got the one for the river cruise going up the Mississippi. And I'm like, that's like 6 states right there that we've never been to. So looking forward to doing those. But yeah, the ultimate goal is 100 weddings by my 100th birthday. And Diane, this is the key that we can't forget. I'm including the honeymoons. Yes. So
nice.
To be able to enjoy my 100th honeymoon without taking Viagra, that also helps me stay in line with my health goals. So it's a definite blessing all the way around. So yeah, 29 is coming up we're going in September, because we don't do it on our anniversary every year. So I appreciate the reminder of like, yeah, it's a couple weeks away. And on my website, I have a count up instead of a count down. So it counts how long we've been married for. So reverse counter, which is fun. But we decided that we want to have different experiences at different times. Like my bride, her dream was to get married in New York at Christmas time. And I'm like, it's cold there, but okay. So we had to get flexible.
That's what fires are for.
Yeah, so we had to get flexible with the dates and times and anniversaries. So now it's just like, okay, when's the weather going to be great? What's the experience we're going to have? We chased, and you're a Southern Cal person like me, so you'll get it. Some of the East Coast listeners, please apologize for my naivete. But my bride and I were like, ooh, wouldn't it be cool to actually see leaves change color? Right? Like, what would a season be like? Yeah, let's go to Boston and get married so we can see the leaves change. And so we planned it all out. We got out there and they had like the biggest drought ever and the leaves were still green. And we're like, oh, we drove all the way out here. And then some people are like, okay, drive up to Maine and you'll find it eventually.
Right.
And so yeah, we just have one big adventure for sure.
This is so great. Regardless of the number of time marriage, we're talking like chronologically, 25 years in the making, and where you see a lot of people who, maybe, let's not just say fall out of love, but maybe sometimes fall out of like and life circumstances and things that happen. What have you and Susan done to just create that magic of more love over the years and more connection that is just, it's outside the curve?
Yeah. Oh, Diane, that's a fabulous question, because in reality, and it's one of these, at the end of the day, it's really the simplest things. And so I'm going to answer that question and people will be like, oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. And so I hearken back. I'm a sports guy at heart. And I know San Diego has lost their football team and I mourn for you guys. But if you look at, for example, like football, they just did the OTAs or organized team activities. And you look at the video and they're like, okay, what are these, some of these guys are making $40 million a year. And it's like, okay, what amazing training are they doing to these guys? Oh, well, they're blocking and tackling and throwing the ball. You would think they know how to do that by now, right? And if you go to, and a lot of people are big into baseball, spring training. Yeah, let's go watch spring training. Okay, what are they doing? They're pitching and catching. They're fielding a grounder. It's like, you've been doing that since you were in Little League. Like, I'm waiting for this advanced, amazing. And I realized like, it's all about the basics, the minutia of the basics and doing it well. We just crowned the new NBA champions, the Warriors, yeah, California team, right? So it's definitely going to be a long time for the Lakers win anything again. But you look at some of the difference between how is it, right, that it's just this tiny little bit of where they're putting their foot and how much spacing they're getting so they can make the shot. And just these little tiny things. It was the little things make all the difference. So when it comes to a relationship and falling out of like, falling out of love, what happened, drum roll, dun, dun, dun. A news flash, especially in Southern California and San Diego County, but also all of the United States and the world, because I know this podcast goes worldwide, which is exciting, is that there is a drift. And you have heard this countless times, Diane, say it with me, like, I don't know what happened. We just drifted apart, right?
Absolutely.
And people just say it subconsciously, and you hear it over and over. You're like, oh, that's too bad. But no, there's a drift. So as someone who enjoys the beaches of Southern California, you go swim, you go paddle out, and next thing you know, you're 3 lifeguard huts down, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Oh, there's a drift. That's why the lifeguard's there. So I'm making sure everyone understands there is a drift in any relationship. The world will naturally pull you apart. It doesn't take a genius to realize, wow, kids, activities, school, work, entrepreneurship, everything, but it just naturally pulls you apart. So the solution is simply to paddle. So I'll use a Southern California analogy, and then we'll hit everybody eventually here. But many of us have had stand-up paddle boards, or been in a kayak, or even on a lazy river in the inner tubes, right?
Yeah.
One of my, again, this I'm just recent, went to this big water park, and lazy river, it's going to be awesome. So me and my bride start together, and I turn to see where the kids are. And we're 10 feet apart. Oh, wait, come back, because there's a drift. And so what has to be done is you have to intentionally paddle towards each other, and at the same time, so you don't naturally drift apart. And too often when things happen in life, one person is paddling or one person isn't. And so I remember when my bride and I we had two littles, they're grown now, but when our kids were little, it was diapers and all this stuff and everything. I'm like, wow, I need to change my paddling because otherwise I'll leave my bride in the dust because she's just trying to hold on and survive, right? So it's about intentionally paddling together. And too often people think like this Moana marriage that I call in the book of like, hey, we're going to become, our two boats are going to become one and then we'll just naturally stay together. It's like, no, you're two separate people.
Right.
But you get the joy of being in harmony together when you're paddling together. Like you've seen it, right? You see these people, I know a lot of Ivy League schools, they do the rowing, right? And it's all about being in synchronicity, right? It's like paddling together. When you're together, it's beautiful. But when you're hitting your spouse with your paddle or you're 10 feet away, right? Like, and you mentioned the beauty of a wedding, right? My bride and I don't often go to weddings because you never know what you're going to get. But with Nicole, I was like, okay, there's going to be some high quality people here. So we'll make the trek. But other times you're just like, whoa, I don't want to be around this. So it really just comes down to recognizing there is a drift. So I need to intentionally paddle, not once a month, not once a week, not once a quarter, it's a daily thing, because before you turn your head, whoosh, they're gone. And it's just doing little things to stay connected and fight the drift. So in Southern California, San Diego County, it's about a 73% divorce rate. That's a pretty powerful drift.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to paddle and you're just going to be like, we're good, then join the 73%. But if you want something different, you want different results, choose to be intentional and paddle together. And that makes all the difference, Diane.
Right. Well, you and I have talked quite a bit about intention and about words and, how they matter. And, one of the things, I talk about with my clients is your calendar and what's on there. And you've also talked about what you get to do versus what you have to do. There's so many people in the space of, well, I have to do this and I have to do this. You don't have to do any of those things. It's that get to mentality to be able to look at that. And, especially over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of people who feel like they've been beat up a lot just because of the culture of what's out there. And, there's a lot of fears that are out there. And you have a really great philosophy at looking at fear and what your focus is. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, sure. Well, I just remind me of this because as a ADD visionary, I tend to take the long way around the block. And I always come back, but sometimes I need a little help. Like, okay, let's turn this last corner. Right. So I will answer that directly, but you brought something up that really, God's like, oh, don't miss this. So and my daughter and I discovered it at our Sunday experience. And I say that instead of church because people say church and it's like, they don't even know what the word church means. But our Sunday experience, I'm exposing my daughter to look at some of the subconscious messaging that happens even by accident, Diane. Yeah. So for example, at our church, they had our pastor did a great sermon on Philemon, which is a story of, he related to Juneteenth and a story of, hey, how to, forgiveness, this anti-slavery message and just this whole put together. But one of the messages that they put on the screen, right, it said, we should do this, 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 and this. And my daughter elbowed me and she goes, there's the should shame, Daddy. And I'm like, hey, you caught it. And I was like, they could have just simply said, instead of you should, right? Guilt, shame, should, shame, right? They could have said, we have the ability to, or we get to, forgive those people that we don't feel like forgiving. But instead it said, we should, da, 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 da. And so that starts that narrative and it's a subconscious thing, right? And that's why there's so much challenge with the church because it's this shame, guilt culture and they don't even know they're doing it, right? So with your question about changing the mindset, changing the focus, because whatever you focus on, you feel, even if it's not true, and that's Tony Robbins 101, but it's so true. Whatever you focus on, you feel, even if it's not true. Mm-hmm. And so because, you can't see your label when you're inside the bottle, right, Diana, we're all inside our own bottles. Right. So we can't see the label. And then when we're inside the bottle, right, what we can see is distorted. So we're not even seeing reality. So a perfect example of this, Matthew Kelly taught me this one, is that, Diane, you do it all the time, right? Recording the podcast and then you listen back and you're like, do I sound like that? Like, that's not my voice, is it? It's like, yeah, that's your voice. Like, we don't even know what we sound like.
Yeah.
Okay. Or me in athletics, or like my son, for example, he's a big parkour guy. So, he sends parkour videos and we laugh all the time. And the same with me, doing anything athletic. I see the video of me playing with the kids or whatever. I'm like, I don't look like that, do I? I don't move that slow, do I? I felt like I was running so fast. What's going on? So we can't even see reality. We don't even know what we sound like. We don't even know what we look like. And so what we focus on, we feel, even if it's not true. So we don't even know we're in this distorted reality. And so that way we say things like, oh, that person hurt me. No, they didn't. Right? That's not what happened. Well, they did this and this and this. It's like, again, whatever you focus on, you feel, even if it's not true. And so it's about waking up to this self-delusion. And I think from a faith-based perspective, a lot of people are realizing, right, that the enemy isn't some guy in a red jacket with horns and a big red tail. He's really good at looking good, smelling good, and he doesn't need to bring calamity into our lives. All he needs to do is distract us.
Right.
And he can distract us with good things. How many times have you seen that, right? Like the missionary doing 500 different things, right? Just totally distracted with good things, so they're not effective.
Right.
Or
absolutely.
Getting distracted with the minutia of business, so you're not effective. Getting distracted with the minutia of parenting, right? So you're distracted. And as a homeschool father, I really discovered this with like, wow, it's really easy to get distracted with this curriculum and this check the box and we got to get this stuff in versus, hey, what's really important here? Right. What is the value that they need to get from this? So it's not, I got to get through this. It's what can I get from this? Right. And so too often we miss that in this whole distorted state. And so as I started focusing on different things, realizing, and my bride we just had a moment before the show, Diane, she'll share. So my bride is going through a challenging period as our son just graduated. And as a homeschool parent, we got to actually there's a ceremony, about 15 kids. We got to give him his diploma and we gave a little speech and it was really cool. But he left the next day. He drove with a buddy cross country, LA to Florida. So he's been in Florida for a couple of weeks. And my bride is just like, it's the firstborn out of the nest, right? This whole stuff. And she's just like, oh, my son, and all this. So she went to her acupuncturist this morning. She's all excited to go acupuncture. She always feels so relaxed after that. She's just like, oh, I can't wait. And so she's in the room. She said her clothes were off. She's ready. And then the assistant comes in and goes, oh, she can't make it today. Something happened. And so immediately, to my bride's credit, she got angry. Like, this is my time, right? I scheduled my whole day around this. I want to relax, But that's what she's focusing on. So she's feeling anger, resentment, and she's like, wait a minute. And she stopped and she goes, this acupuncture is awesome. I love her. Obviously, something has happened, right? That's a major issue that she can't come. So maybe I need to focus on, hey, how can I support her? Or, wow, something must be going on with her. I wonder what's happening over there. So she shifted her focus and instantly everything changed. So it's so simple, but when we're in it, right, it's just like, wow, how do I, so the key is to make these guardrails. So as an expert, again, Diane, you're there, right? Like when it's fight or flight, when your hands, from your background, right? When your hands on the pistol and, when it's going down, right? It's too late to go, I need to manage what I'm put, right? Right. So you got to create the guardrails beforehand. So before you get out of the car, after you get the call, right? Like, how do we create these guardrails so I never get to these places where it's too late? And so that's on a long way around the block here. We're bringing home. That's what getting remarried in a different state or country does for us, Diane, is that it allows us to be in one of two states. I'm either in a post-honeymoon bliss, woohoo, okay, or we're in this anticipation of, the next one. So our next one's in September. We're going out to Kentucky. there is a life-size Noah's Ark, if you haven't heard about it. Somebody built a life-size Noah's Ark. It's a giant museum. It's to scale. The thing is massive. So we're going to go get married on Noah's Ark. How cool would that be? Right? So we're in this state of getting excited and anticipating and, okay, looking forward. And as I'm going through the day and I'm like leading up to this next marriage, this exciting, this next honeymoon, it's an instant attitude check.
Right.
For when, my bride may do something that I'm not too thrilled about. And it's like, so those guardrails keep us in those two states. So I don't have time to focus on, right? Oh, she hurt my feelings, or what she's not doing, or she needs to do this, do this. Right. That's all gone because I'm just focused on, hey, the next honeymoon's coming up. Hey, the next wedding's coming up, or the post-honeymoon bliss. So for those that are listening, they're like, well, look, I don't want to get married 8,000 times like you. Okay, great. But what other guardrails can you put in place?
Right. So how are you creating that?
Yeah. So you never get to that heightened state. And per your question, an instant recalibration is, hey, what am I focusing on? Hey, what do I get to do?
Right.
What do I get to do today? So there's some quick tips. But yeah, great question. Again, I specialize in long answers to short questions.
No, it's all good. I want to bring our listeners along with us, because I mean, I've heard time and time again, and this is, where it comes back to words and intention and those things of, the traumas that's happened over the last couple of years. People are feeling more isolated than ever. There's a lot of things around that. And you and I have talked about processing trauma emotions, and let's get into that.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on that? When people are, they're in the space, we've had more suicide attempts than ever, people being in depressive states, and people are like, hey, it looks great on the island of Evan where he is like in honeymoon and doing all of these things. How do I swim out there?
Okay, well, first, and I was talking with my daughter, my bride, we were just processing this yesterday, Diane. So again, such a time as this and Holy Spirit moment, but we were talking about, so my bride has a convalescent ministry that she runs. So she is constantly around old people, right? Or geriatrics and all that stuff. And we were talking, I don't know how we got on the subject, we were talking about how women typically live longer than men. And my bride was like, yeah, when you come to the homes, I don't go that often, but when you come to the home, she says, literally it's 10 to 1 women to men. Mm-hmm. And so she has accurate real-time data, right? Like, where's all the guys around here? Like, they didn't make it. So I was explaining to my daughter that we discovered that I believe the reason females live longer than males is because the way the feminine process emotions. Men do not have a healthy way to process emotions. The only time you see people processing, typically sports, right? It's okay to cry if you win the championship, right? But other than that, you can't do anything, right? And men don't have examples of real men processing. All we have is fiction. We have movies and sports, okay? The movies aren't real, and sports is like, okay, the elite of the elite of the elite, right? So because men don't have a way to process their emotions, I think that emotional component, the medical profession is finally realizing, like, oh, emotions affect your immune system. Emotions affect whether you can battle cancer or not. Who would have thought, right? Mm-hmm. So this processing emotion, what we see now is the effects, right? And I'm not going to get a debate on Second Amendment or any of this stuff, but I'll just keep it super clean and simple here. People that process their emotions effectively, people that love themselves, okay, do not take a gun or a knife and go to school and start killing and stabbing people, okay? Agreed. People that process their emotions, people that love themselves do not beat up their spouses, okay? People that process their emotions, people that love themselves do not traffic other human beings, okay? People that, any ailment of society, right? This outcrying all around what mental health and drug addiction, right? Which are, basically the same thing, right? Whether it's homelessness, right? It's not, oh, they just need a place to live. No, 95% of the homeless is because of mental health and drug addiction. Okay. And all the ails of society all point back to mental health and drug addiction. So it's like, wow, if we don't process, this is what we get. Right. So how do we shift that narrative? And here's the good thing. The island of heaven is not an island. It's a continent. and, and the bottom line is, right, you either, bring heaven to earth every day or you bring hell to earth every day. And
Agreed.
those are choices, right? And you hear these terms, right? Like, I'm living through hell on earth. Exactly. Like, look at what you're focused on, right? So it's not this magical island of someday, right? And that's what my bride and I discovered with our marriage is happily ever after, okay? And I'll expand it here. Happily ever after, processing emotions healthfully, all of these, these heightened, amazing states are not a place to be discovered. Like, okay, if I can just read the right book, or if I can go to the right program, or if I can, get on Diane's show, then, right, I'll be happy, right? And happily ever after is a place not, to be discovered. It's a place that we create every day. Mm-hmm. And so every day it's a choice of, wow, how do I reprocess my anger into grace? How do I reprocess my frustration and my anxiety into forgiveness? How do I reprocess that, or even just process it? And just speaking about it is so healthy. Right now, people can finally come out of the closet about mental illness and processing emotions, and like, hey, people talk about how's Susan? I go, wow, she's processing big time. Our son left the house, what happens now? Da, da, da. So I think just openly talking about it, like I teach my daughter, she's amazing. You met her.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. We love her. So I help her understand to lead with her anxieties. So she, like me, has major social anxiety. So the choice is to just be quiet, look around, I hope no one talks to me, or lead with the anxiety and say like, hey, social situations make me real anxious. Let's have a quality discussion instead. Hey, what about, what if we talk about this at the table? Or what if we do that? Or what if we do that? So I think the real key, the first step in processing is just owning the elephant in the room. Yeah, because that relaxes everybody, because they're like, oh yeah, I see the elephant too. You're like, okay, cool. All right. So yeah, we got the elephant. Okay, now let's go to the next thing. So I would love to hear from you, Diane, about how, your thoughts on my male, female, theological deal there with living longer, but also kind of what you've discovered, been some great real-time processing tips to where something you can go to instantly, because people are like, oh yeah, I'll process later, right? I'll process later, which is what your background was, right? Like, hey, I got a job to do, I can process later. And it's like, well, later never comes. So
yeah, absolutely. And, and those were, they were helpful skills in the moment, being on the street, in law enforcement, and especially in undercover work. You had to be able to do that to be able to move forward and make that happen. I think there's a lot of validity to that, about it being okay in society for women to process and not so much for men. And that's why I think having men who have strong role models that have groups together, especially with couples that have other couples. I know that's part of your work, and having other strong faith-based couples together, because then you get to see that example and be that for each other. And I think it really comes down to creating a safe space and having people who have your back no matter what. And I think the relationships and the friendships that really moved through these last couple of years were those that were like, no matter what, the sky's falling, whatever people's perspective is, I got you. We love you. We're here. Let's figure it out, and have that mentality versus hiding underneath a rock, and to stand into what's important and knowing what your values are and what that looks like. And you talk about a term that I really love, the whole avoda, right? And one of the things that I think we compartmentalize so much of our life, like, okay, now we're at church, now we're at work, now we're doing all these things. But I love the whole concept of that word being a lifestyle, where, you're always in worship. You're always doing what your passion is. You're always in your relationship. And you show that in what you're doing with Susan, is like, hey, we're always finding a way to merge in together and not letting those things, divide us. There's so much division happening. And I really attribute a lot of this to the media out there. People think when they see this media chaos that it is the whole world, whereas it's just this microcosm of perpetuating fear, of having people believe that that's what the world is really about. And I know for a fact where I've been on tragic scenes and I've gone home and watched the news and look at and go like, that's not even what happened.
Yeah.
That is not what happened. And so people really need to get outside of that. And that's where you get to have, I love how you guys talk about bringing God into things. You have to have discernment. You have to be really clear about what it is that you're here to do, and be more of that and be more of the example of that. And the more we have that here in the world, it gives people those positive examples to make that be okay, that you don't get caught up in the chaos, crazy spin cycle that will take you down.
Oh, absolutely. And one other thing I want to chime in on is, as we talk about, right, being in your bottle is a distorted view, but the greatest distortion is fear.
Yeah.
Fear, by definition, distorts, right? We've all been there, right? Even my daughter, we were watching this fun commercial on TV with the dad. It's like from the ad council where the daughter is afraid of the monster in the room. So the dad goes and he's working on his laptop under her bed, and it's like, okay, be a cool dad. And my daughter and I were talking about the monsters in the room and all this stuff. And, whenever our fear is heightened, everything's distorted, right? Everything's bigger, everything's meaner, everything's nastier, or vice versa, right? And so just understanding that this whole fear narrative that's being shoved down our throat is to distort everything. And it's like, wait a minute, like, where can I go to get the truth? Right. So the bottom line is the truth is not on the news networks. OK, the truth comes from you sitting in a still, quiet place and dialing in and saying, OK, God, I need your help here. I need you to guide and direct me. What's going on here? Or especially in the church world, and we'll talk a little bit about the Avoda part, but again, I'm not down on church. I'm not negative on church. I'm just down on what people have tried to turn it into, because they're not willing to take responsibility and they don't want to do the work. Right. So church becomes this do all end all. And it's like, it's not designed for that. Right. It's like trying to make, eat 3 meals a day just on salt. Salt is a powerful ingredient. It's good for you, right? Real salt is good for you, not the processed stuff, but the real salt is good for you. Makes, adds flavor, adds texture, but you're not going to sit down and have a meal of salt, right? It's like, it doesn't work that way. Right. So, and it even talks in scripture, you're the salt of the earth, right? It's not eat salt 3 meals a day and this is all you need to sustain you. It's like, no, this is just this tiny bit. But coming back to the Avoda lifestyle, when you go to church, typically, again, subconsciously, they'll say, okay, settle down. It's time for worship, which says subconsciously, oh, you can't worship anywhere else except right here, this way, this form, right? So or they'll say, yeah, time for worship time. Okay, come worship with us, because you can't do it by yourself. You have to come here. So you have your worship box, which is like here, and then your work box, like, work is something you do way over there. It's totally separate, right? And then they'll even do these things like, okay, well, if you want to serve, we have these service projects available. And it's like, oh, well, you mean I can't do something else that doesn't count as serving? Like, serving is way over here, work's way over here, and worship's way over here. But just like the Trinity, it's all one thing. It's all together. Like, again, not a theological study here, but, for those that, God, Father, Holy Spirit, right? It's all one, right? It's not separated. It's not divided, right? And that's what, you talk about with the media and all this thing. It's really about this, how do I divide, right? How do we make everything divisive where life itself is inclusive? Right. Women understand way this more than men, because men were so gifted at, putting everything in a compartment, right? But everything affects everything else. Right. And so the media wants to divide and focus, right? We're going to focus on this tiny minutia and call it everything, right? And it's like, no, it's all encompassing. So living the Avoda lifestyle is saying, hey, especially as an entrepreneur, my work, my worship, and my service is all one thing all the time. Right. And it looks different ways to different things. Like, for example, my bride and daughter and I were driving back from something. We had an amazing worship time. Okay. We're just talking about life. We're discovering, we're sharing, or we're putting on some fun songs, or that's a magic time of worship. Okay. It's also a magic time of serving, because it's like, hey, we're pouring into our daughter, who's then going to pour into other people. And at our dinner table, we have talks about like, okay, what does your Avoda look like? So for my daughter's going to be turning 16, my son's going to be turning 19. Like, what does your Avoda look like? So my daughter's like, well, my Avoda looks like she volunteers at a stable and she's doing pony camps right now and serving the littles and seeing how these other kids live and helping the owner and seeing how she runs her business. And so for her at almost 16, that's kind of her Avoda. She loves horses. I mean, there's plenty of people who come on, talk about the spiritual aspect of horses, and it's true. Okay. Mm-hmm. Blood pressure instantly declines when you're around horses.
Right.
Okay. Right. It's all encompassing. God created the horse. God created these animals for reasons, right? Mm-hmm. Say, hey, this is all encompassing. It's not a separate thing. So work, worship, and service as a lifestyle instead of these boxes bring so much joy and health and instant processing.
Right.
Because it's not like, oh, well, I got to wait for worship so I can process through that about the week, right? It's like, no, man. And I remember having one quick story when my kids were smaller, pre-COVID and all this stuff, back when Disneyland had less rules and regulations and all this. But we would have these magical Sunday mornings because I realized, hey, Sunday morning is the best time to go to Disneyland because, all the parents are zapped out from the weekend, right? That are staying the weekend, so typically Sunday morning, there's no traffic. And you don't get lines until like noon. So we'd have these magic moments the kids are always up early. So I'd wake up, drive to Disneyland with no traffic. That's an Avoda moment right there. Like, yes, 5 lanes wide and no traffic. But we'd have these magic moments of listening to music, driving to Disneyland and having these worship experiences, just praising God, seeing the snow-capped mountains, driving in, being so thankful. Like, hey, I get to go to this cool park. It's about dreams and excitement, right? Spending time with my kids. And then having these Disneyland moments and then coming back and it's all tied up in there. But we get so conditioned to the boxes and the division. And it's like, wow, what if we just put it all together? Wouldn't that be amazing? And then lastly, when it comes to people, right? That's the other part. Divide, divide, divide. So Louis Gossett Jr., everybody's, favorite actor, you can't get mad at Louis Gossett Jr. He said this one time, actually during a red carpet Oscars event. I've been carrying it forward ever since. He said, Diane, there's only one race, the human race. Mm-hmm. And I was like, isn't that right? Why are we spending so much time dividing over, okay, color of skin? And it's not just color of skin, it's the shade of skin, right? Like, okay, because we're getting down into and now you see this movement of, and it's great because people talk about like these, like, hey, I'm half Filipino, I'm half whatever, so I don't belong anywhere, right? Like, okay, we're off a different color spectrum, right? So it's like all these shades of division. And it's like, we're all just one race, right? Yeah. We're all the human race and we're all created in God's image. Like, where did this whole division thing, it's like, how do we bring it together and realize like, wow. And then even in, Paul's big talk about, right? Hey, there's no Jew, there's no Greek. He even, quoted this, he said, there's no male and female, right? It's just, we're all sewn together in Christ Jesus. And it's like, wow, like, what if we actually started acting that way? Like, again, that would solve a lot of the challenges.
Evan, what would we fight about?
Yes. I appreciate letting me go on that deep tangent, but
all of those things. It's so amazing talking with you, and we could talk forever. And I know that our time's coming to an end. And one of the things I always like to ask my guests, because when we are intentional, we live intentionally, and we have different experiences in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our living room or office. What is your favorite room in your home and why?
That's good. Okay, so. Well, first of all, let me tell you about the biggest room in my house, Diane. The biggest room in my house is the room for improvement. And yeah, regardless of what new house I move into, that will always be the case. So that is also my favorite room because that helps the guardrails, right? Because if I realize, wow, man, the more I know, the more I don't know. So that gives me the empathy I need when I want to rain fire from heaven down on the guy that cut me off on the freeway, or the guy doing something stupid, or the guy, whatever, right? It's like, whoa, hold it. Like, I still got stuff to work on. So, maybe I could give this guy a little grace. So that is my favorite room in the house, the room for improvement.
That is a mic drop right there. And I know that our listeners are going to stay in contact with you. How can they best do that?
Oh, well, if you are excited about joining the Marriage of Greatness Revolution, you can check out marriageofgreatness.com. And the one thing my bride and I love more than anything is just to encourage people. So we have a little box that says, if you want encouragement with your marriage, you can just type in your email and you will get pure encouragement emailed to you at exactly the right time. And every once in a while, it's probably 80% encouragement, maybe 10% zingers, right? I'll call you out on some ways that you may need to improve, but for the most part, it's just pure encouragement. And I find that's the fuel that a lot of people are missing, a lot of people need. So if you're looking for that fresh drink of water in probably a dry area in your marriage, then that'd be the best place to go, marriageofgreatness.com.
I love it. I love it. And this is so in line with just being intentional about creating freedom in your life. And you are doing that in so many different ways. And I just want to thank you for your time and your wisdom and being here with us today, Evan.
Oh, Diane, I appreciate your listening ears and letting me go far down the rabbit hole, and hope the listeners appreciate it.
You got it. Well, and to our listeners out there, thank you so much for spending your time here with us. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.